Hi there, time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. And joining us tonight are the Mirror's Andy Dunn and Jack Rosser from The Sun. A very good evening to you both, gents. Let's quickly run through the back pages for you. Starting in the Mirror, Carlo's Wembley trembly ahead of the Champions League final. A new United deal for Manchester United's main man, that is Kobbie Mainoo. Carlo's dream, obviously a big focus on the Champions League final, and England cricketers' 16-month betting ban. Big focus on this man. This is in the Times. Over to you, Jude. Also a story about Frank Lampard potentially getting the Burnley job. And Cars, as we mentioned there, the cricketer hit with a 3-month ban. United, that is all about Kobbie Mainoo and his new deal, potentially coming after the Euros. Ruud linked to replace Enzo at Leicester, that's Ruud van Nistelrooy. And Sancho can shine for Dortmund. This in the Express, pros and cons. A 5-year deal for Maresca, but he may be forced to sell Gallagher. Also featuring there, Kobbie jackpot. And fear is real for Bell's boys. This is the big story on the back of The Sun. Prem and 18 only, focusing on the potential of cutting the size of the big leagues. Lampard burning to return, potentially heading to Burnley as we mentioned, and fear we go, Bellingham. And then in the Telegraph, teenagers' Olympic terror plot ahead of this summer's games in Paris. OK, let's start off in the Mirror and focus on the Champions League final. Gents, Andy, let's come to you first up. It's interesting, this from Carlo Ancelotti. He's been there, he's done it, he's got the T-shirt, he's got loads of them. He's guarding against complacency, isn't he? Talking about fear for Real Madrid, isn't he?
Yes, he is. And you know, bear in mind, those of us who were at Wembley just a few days back for the FA Cup final, we saw, I think, what complacency can do to a team that is very, very strongly fancied to win a big game. It happened to Manchester City, and the same thing could happen to Real Madrid. And Carlo Ancelotti, as you say, he's been there. He's got, I think it's 4 managers' T-shirts, 2 as a player in the Champions League. He will know to guard against that in the same way that Pep Guardiola did, but possibly couldn't. And yes, Ancelotti will be looking at this, I think, and also reminding his players that, you know, the overwhelming odds in favour of them count for nothing. They count for nothing. And I genuinely believe that's right. Because, again, just referring to that FA Cup final, to me, Borussia Dortmund are far more likely to win, in theory, than Manchester United were likely to beat Manchester City. Borussia Dortmund are outsiders, you know, clearly. However, I was at both semi-finals, both semi-final legs of Bayern Munich, Real Madrid. And let's face it, Real Madrid were one, Manuel Neuer howler away from being out of the competition. It's as simple as that. And listen, and those of us who were at Bayern Munich Real Madrid versus Manchester City, at no point really during those 2 legs did we think that Real Madrid were going to get through. So in a way, they're the League of Champions, but they are slightly fortunate to be in the final. And you could argue that Dortmund were perhaps even a bit more impressive in getting through to the final and seeing off PSG. So I think this one, I wouldn't say it's too close to call, because I think Real Madrid will do it, but it'll be a close game. I really do. I really think it'll be a close game, and I think you'd be foolish just to assume that it's going to be yet another Champions League win for Real Madrid.
Yeah, and it's been very difficult to score goals against Borussia Dortmund during this year's Champions League. Let's head into the Daily Mail. Carlo's dream, Jack, obviously talking about the potential of winning a 5th Champions League. Do you think experience will tell, or do you quite like the way that Edin Terzic is approaching this as well, and sort of heaping the pressure a little bit on Real Madrid, because all the expectation is on them, isn't it?
It is, and you know, like Andy mentioned, we saw what happened last weekend at Wembley, and I was on this show and was asked how Man United would got on if they had a chance, and I said absolutely 0. So I think that proved exactly what we can expect in finals like these. And I really like Borussia Dortmund's approach to this entire competition. I was at the second leg in Paris, and everyone turned up to that expecting it to be a night for Mbappe, his last home game in Europe, and Borussia Dortmund really showed up and proved everyone wrong. And Mats Hummels has been so fantastic for them in this competition this year. Tweeted something afterwards saying, "Everyone has always wanted to play us through this year. It's lucky we got to the final to give everyone a chance." And that's the sort of approach they're taking into these games. They came through, the hardest group in the group stage and have managed to prove so many doubters wrong along the way to this final. Carlo there in the piece on the back of the Mail has been talking about how wonderful it would be for him to win at Wembley a 5th Champions League of his managerial career at Wembley, having managed in England. But of course, Borussia Dortmund have got some of their own Wembley history that they'll want to rewrite, having lost to Bayern Munich. The last time final was at Wembley in 2013. So yes, Real Madrid are favourites. They've got the history, they've got the experience, but Borussia Dortmund have shown all the way through that they don't really care what the odds are in these games.
Obviously no England or English side in the Champions League final, but obviously a big English subplot. It's at Wembley to start off with. And Jude Bellingham is at the centre of it all. Over to you, Jude. Huge amount of expectation on him to shine. And when the pressure has been on him to do that, he has done it this season, hasn't he, Andy?
He's not just done it this season. He's done it pretty much since, we first saw him in an England jersey. Birmingham fans will tell you that he's done it from the moment he stepped into that blue jersey as well. He's done it throughout his career, which he's played a lot of games, considering he doesn't turn 21 until the end of next month, until the end of June. And he responds every time. And it's funny because, again, just harking back to those 2 legs against Bayern Munich in the semi-finals, I was at them both. And Bellingham actually, wasn't the most impressive player on the pitch by far. He wasn't in that great form, but he managed to affect the game in some fashion, and was there and having a real impact at the end of the game. He got taken off very, very late on against Bayern in the second leg, but he had an impact. He manages to find a way, and that's a sign of his maturity. What I would quickly say, though, about Real Madrid is that you look forward to seeing other players. Obviously, we are really, really interested to see how Jude Bellingham does. We are really, really want him to do well and to go into the European Championships with England on a real high. But also, I'm looking forward to seeing Vinicius Junior, who I think has been sensational for Real Madrid this season, and Toni Kroos's farewell. But yes, as English fans, with one eye on the Euro, we want Bellingham going there full of confidence. Although, having said that, I don't think there's much that could ever knock Jude Bellingham's confidence.
No, he's so impressive, isn't he, Jack, on and off the field?
He is, and it's the way he's sort of taken this huge pressure of Real Madrid. He's obviously wearing the number 5 Zidane's shirt completely in his stride. I was at his debut for Real Madrid at Bilbao all the way back at the start of the season, and you sort of wonder, how are the fans going to receive him? How is he going to handle the pressure? Will he be able to make his mark on the game? And he was absolutely everywhere. He scored a goal. The fans and the media over there, famously critical and famously hard to win over, seem to have fallen in love with him immediately because of the way he approaches not only the game, but the way he speaks as well. He's such a mature talker when you get the chance to hear him speak, and someone that seems well beyond his years, and in terms of the way he handles himself in those precious situations. So while there is a hell of a lot of a spotlight on him, and there will be in the summer as well, you'd have no real fears about him handling it. Back
page of the Star, the other Englishman who's going to be on the field, you can see just at the top there, Jadon Sancho, at a club that makes him smile, in Borussia Dortmund. And Joe Cole, interestingly, basically saying, look, this is your opportunity to go and show everyone, the world, how good you are. Andy?
It's a huge game for Jadon Sancho on many levels. Listen, we don't know what's going to happen at Manchester United, because it's quite clear that the issue is a personal one between him and the current manager, Erik ten Hag. We don't know what's going to happen. We still don't know if ten Hag will be in charge of Manchester United next season. And if that's not the case, then there's a way back for Jadon Sancho. If that is the case, and if ten Hag does remain in position, then there's no way back for Jadon Sancho. I'm fairly certain of that. However, as I think reports have been carried today on Sky Sports News, the chances of Jadon Sancho actually moving permanently to Borussia Dortmund, even if United were to say, listen, you can have him for, say, let's say a cut price, in inverted commas, £40 million. There's no way Borussia Dortmund are going to pay £40 million for Jadon Sancho. He might extend his loan, but what Jadon Sancho needs to do is put in a marquee performance at Wembley tomorrow night that will maybe make other clubs, big clubs, sit up and take notice, make other big European clubs think he might be worth a risk of £40 million. United are going to have to take a hit on him no matter what if they want to sell him this summer. But Sancho, it's a bit of a cliche, but it's a big shop window territory for Jadon Sancho tomorrow night.
And Jack, someone who is guaranteed a big future at Manchester United, featured on a couple of the papers, but that is the back of the Star, as you can see there. United, paying tribute to Kobbie Mainoo, and potentially going to be bagging a new contract, but quite wisely wants to just try and make sure that his focus remains on the Euros, on the football, rather than getting too het up about how much money he's going to be earning.
Yeah, he's another one that when you see him play and when you hear him talk, seems incredibly composed for a player that not many people had heard of at the start of the season. He manages to grab games and control them when he's on the pitch for Manchester United. And I think the fact that, there's so much uncertainty around Old Trafford, around Manchester United, the manager, but the one thing that in all the reports about Manchester United in the last weeks and months that has been made clear is that he is going nowhere. They see him and a couple of other players as the absolute future of that club. And I think to have that impact in such a short time, to break into this England squad in such a short time, and look impressive when he's played for England as well. Even in small moments, he didn't get too long against Brazil at Wembley, but managed to show what he was capable of. And the fact that he's gone from there to starting or being in the conversation around whether he should start alongside Declan Rice at a major tournament is incredibly impressive. And I think the fact as well, the maturity that is shown in the fact that he wants to focus on that, wants to make his mark there, and that will only help him when he goes back to Manchester United as well.
You're watching Back Pages tonight. Welcome back to the Mirror's Andy Dunn and Jack Rosser from The Sun. Let's take you straight in to the Express back page, and the headline is pros and cons, and it's focusing on a 5-year deal for Enzo Maresca, heading in to be the new boss at Chelsea. But he may well be forced to sell fan favourite Gallagher. Andy, I wanted to start with you on this. Just first up on Enzo Maresca, is he the right fit at Chelsea for you?
I think he's a very interesting fit. I really do. I probably haven't seen enough of his work to make that judgment, but I like the way he speaks. He's clearly very meticulous. You've seen that he's going to take a big backroom staff to Chelsea, and let's wait and see. Everything I hear about him, I haven't dealt with him personally, but everyone who has dealt with him personally that I know is extremely impressed by him. And listen, they give him a 5-year deal. They're not averse to a long-term deal at Chelsea, as we all know. But they're certainly showing some faith in him. And he's got a good squad at his disposal. He really has got a good squad at his disposal. And that includes Conor Gallagher. That, though, is a big situation. A year left of his current deal. That's an element. And, of course, he makes big profits if you sell him under the PSR rules. But they'd be foolish to sell a man who I think should be a young man who should be going forward, the permanent captain of that club.
Yeah, and Jack, Maurizio Pochettino, Enzo Maresca's predecessor, was very keen on Conor Gallagher. And I suppose you could read between the lines and say, well, maybe he wanted to keep him and was told, well, you're not going to be able to. And then he said bye-bye. And Enzo Maresca's almost sort of been forced into a corner by maybe having to sell him or some of the other homegrown players. What's your take on it, Jack?
That was definitely the situation with Pochettino. It was one of the factors that played into him and the club deciding to part ways. It's a frankly ridiculous situation that Chelsea have got themselves into, where they have to be selling off fantastic players like Conor Gallagher, those that have got, the history with Chelsea, the love for Chelsea, and a real connection with fans at a time when, because of the way things have gone under the new ownership, that relationship between club and fans is nowhere near where they would want it to be. It's a real shame that someone like Conor Gallagher, who I think I saw their social media either today or yesterday lauding how many minutes he'd played and and how well he's done over the season, the fact that it's almost accepted that he's going to have to leave this summer to ensure they balance the books after some, frankly, ludicrous spending in recent years. It's a situation that no one really likes. And because of the situation they're in as well, they're not going to be able to get exactly the fee that they want for him, because they have got to sell players before the end of June. So it's a difficult situation for Maresca to be coming into. But I suppose if he goes in having not worked with Gallagher and just accepts that I'm not going to be able to have him as a player, then it is perhaps easier for him to move on in terms of that situation than it would have been for a manager in Pochettino who had played him in almost every game and given him the armband when Reece James wasn't there, which was obviously the majority of the season.
So Enzo Maresca's heading to Chelsea. In his place at Leicester, let's head back to the story at the bottom there. Ruud linked to replace Enzo. Ruud van Nistelrooy back in the Premier League, Andy, as manager of Leicester. That's a mouth-watering prospect after he left PSV.
It is. I think that's a really exciting prospect. Listen, we like to see homegrown managers, get their chance at the very highest level in this country. But Ruud van Nistelrooy, he was a fantastic asset for the Premier League as a player, and he's shown in Holland what he did at PSV, and of course he's been with the national team a couple of times as assistant coach. He didn't only coach PSV's first team; he came through the ranks there, coaching the under-19s and the reserve team. He always comes across well. He comes across as a great thinker. Really, really sort of nice, polite guy. I'd like to see him here. I really would. I think Van Nistelrooy, if I was a Leicester City fan, I'd be excited by the prospect of Van Nistelrooy taking over. I really would.
Jack, we're going to focus on the back page of your paper, The Sun, now. And as you can see there, the headline, Football in Meltdown, Prem and 18 only. FIFA plan would cut 2 clubs. Just explain this story, because it's really building up at the moment ahead of this Club World Cup next summer, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems like it's going to be quite a big problem, and my colleague Martin Lipton has been reporting on it all week, the concerns that the Premier League and the Liga primarily at the moment, as well as the PFA and a lot of their members have got over the increasing build-up of the amount of games players are having to play, the minutes they're having to play. We obviously referenced Jude Bellingham earlier and how much football he's played for someone at such a young age. It's a real concern out there. FIFPro had an event on this week highlighting the amount of minutes and the danger it's putting players in. And really we're reaching a point in terms of the schedule where it's going to break if anything more gets added without contingencies. And the fear from domestic football, from La Liga, the president Javier Tebas speaking today, sort of warning that FIFA are going to want to add these games like the Club World Cup, which is obviously being expanded and played in America next year. And there's a feeling that the way to work around that is that FIFA will tell domestic leagues, you've got to limit your top division to 18 teams and 34 games. And that's obviously a situation that fans don't want to see. Fans don't really want to see this Club World Cup either. They'd rather have the Premier League, La Liga, the top leagues around Europe and the world as they are.
Who's winning this battle, Andy? FIFA or the leagues?
Well, I think the leagues will win. I mean, the leagues, have the choice. The Premier League is essentially a private members club. They've got 20 members. 20 members aren't going to vote to become 18 members. It's as simple as that. I mean, it has to be said, there are leagues in Europe that do have 18 teams. And one of them, the Bundesliga, have a representative in the Champions League tomorrow. I think the French League only has 18. The Dutch League has 18. So it's not unprecedented. But the Premier League has been such a success. It's not going to turn around all of a sudden and say, OK, we can get rid of 2 teams. Something needs to be done. Jack is absolutely right in terms of the fixture congestion. At the end of the last Premier League season, Liverpool and Manchester City were playing half a dozen games in 16 or 17 days. That's just too much at the end of a season. Something has to be done. The Premier League teams would rather be no big Club World Cup, no replays in the FA Cup. They're getting that wish. And, of course, a scaled-down involvement in the Carabao Cup. But the Premier League will not in any way countenance any idea. They go through the highest courts on the planet to make sure it doesn't go from 20 to 18.
Jack, I know you covered this story in The Sun yourself. Frank Lampard potentially getting back into management. We can take you to the back of the Times. Lampard on Burnley shortlist. What's your take on this? Do you think this would be a good fit? I mean, there's plenty of managers in the mix at Burnley, isn't there?
There certainly are, yeah. I mean, of course, you've got Craig Bellamy, who was Vincent Kompany's assistant at Turf Moor for 2 years, is definitely in the mix there to to go and have a go at it on his own. And it's an interesting one for Burnley in terms of the way they want to go. Do they want a manager to come in and really stick to that style that Vince and company put in, which you think Craig Bellamy would pick up and continue from there? Frank Lampard isn't really known for that complete Pep style sort of football, but it's an interesting one for him as well, because he's obviously not been in work since he left Chelsea at the end of the season before last, and has been biding his time, really, linked with a few jobs here and there and waiting to pick the right one. So it'll be interesting to see, because obviously the challenge there is you've got to go straight back up. Otherwise, it's deemed a failure. That, regardless of it being a championship job and going back into the Football League to work, that's a lot of pressure he'll be under there, especially after the success that company had the last time they were in the championship. So he's only on the short list at the moment. I think there's a couple of other people in there, as well as him and Bellamy. Scott Parker has been mentioned as well. So it's one that both parties will have to think about, definitely.
Andy, we've only got about 40 seconds on this, but it is a big story. Bryson Carson, the betting ban, it seems to be everywhere at the moment. We've had Paquetá, etc.
Yeah, and what's strange about this one is that it is so historical. It's 2019 was the last offence, 2017 to 2019. So that's like, that's 5 years ago, these 303 offences, none of them involving his own team that he was playing for. And that doesn't excuse it. Cricket's like football, has a zero tolerance attitude towards players betting on their own sport. And he said he was daft, he was young, he wasn't betting on his own team. And now he'll take his punishment and move on from there. Just a reminder to all sportsmen, don't bet on your own sport. It's quite simple.
Quite right. Andy, thank you very much. Jack, the same to you as well. Thanks for your company. If you missed any of the show, there's another chance to see Back Pages tonight at hour. And the show is also available as a podcast. Just download Back Pages on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And Back Pages is back on Monday from 10:30.